Hi, I'm Frances and welcome to my channel. So this morning I read Shirley Jackson. Her It was the book that she was working on at the time of her death called Come Along with Me. And there are only, I think, 35 pages. Um, and I thought, well, I'll read it, but I certainly didn't think it would be very developed. Maybe not so great since she only had 35 pages and it was nowhere near being finished. But as everything with Shirley Jackson, it is incredible and a masterpiece. And I love it so much. And I'm just sick about the fact that I'm never going to read the full novel because it was never able to be finished. And but I thought that I would read what she had written for my channel because it's just so good. And like I said, way better than I imagined it could be. So I thought I would read it. So here we go. I always believe in eating when I can. I had plenty of money and no name when I got off the train, and even though I had had lunch in the dining car, I liked the idea of stopping off for coffee and a donut while I decided exactly which way I intended to go, or which way I was intended to go. I do not believe in turning one way or another without consideration. But then neither do I believe that anything is positively necessary at any given time. I got off the train with plenty of money. I needed a name and a place to go. Enjoyment and excitement and a fine, high gleefulness I knew I could provide on my own. A woman said to me in the train station, "My sister might want to rent a room to a nice lady. She's got this little crippled kid." I could use little crippled kid, I thought, and so I said, "Where does your sister live, dear?" A fine, high gleefulness. I think you understand me. I have everything I want. I sold the house at a profit. Once I got Huey buried, my God, he was a lousy painter. I only had to make 1,003 trips back and forth from the barn, which was a studio, which was a mess, to the house. At my age and size, both 44, in case it's absolutely vital to know, I was carrying those paintings and half-finished canvases. This is the one the artist was working on the morning of the day he died, and it was just as lousy as all the rest. Not even imminent glowing death could help that Huey. And books and boxes of letters, and more than anything else, cartons and cartons of things Huey saved. His old dance programs and marriage licenses and fans and the like. It was none of it anything I ever wanted to see again, I promise you, but I didn't dare throw any of it away for fear Huey might turn up someday asking the way they sometimes do. And knowing Huey, it would be the carbon copy of something back in 1946 he wanted. Everything he might ever possibly come around asking for went into the barn. 1,003 trips back and forth. I'm not a callous person, and no one Huey ever knew could possibly call me practical. But I had waited long enough. I knew I could sell the house. The furniture went to everyone, and I did think that was funny. They came up to me at the auction, people I had known for years, people who had come to the funeral, people who had sat on the chairs and eaten at the dining room table and sometimes passed out on the beds, if the truth were known. And they said things like, "I bought your little maple desk, and anytime you want it back, it's waiting for you. And listen, we picked up the silver service, but it's nothing personal. And, you know, the piano will find a happy home with us. And we are grieving with you today." No, that one they said at the funeral. In any case, all the people I had known for years came to the auction, and the ones who had the nerve came up and spoke to me. Sometimes embarrassed because here they were speaking at the undersprings of my sofa, and sometimes just plain brazen because they had gotten something of mine they wanted. I heard one woman, no names of course, no one has a name yet, saying to another woman that the dining room break front had always been wasted on me, which was true. I only kept it at all because I was afraid my dead grandmother would come around asking. Actually, almost all of it was wasted on me. It was Huey's idea. "You come of such a nice family," he used to say to me. "Your people were all such cultivated, educated people. Try to remember." So that was how I started out. I'd thought about it for a long time, of course. Not that I positively expected I was going to have to bury Huey, but he had had a good life and everything went the way I used to figure it would. I sold the house, I auctioned off the furniture, I put all the paintings and boxes in the barn, I erased my old name and took my initials off everything, and I got on the train and left. I can't say I actually chose the city I was going to. It was actually and truly the only one available at the moment. I hadn't ever been there, and it seemed a good size, and I had enough in my pocket to pay the fare. When I got off the train, I took a deep breath of the dirty city air and carried my suitcase and my pocketbook and my fur stole. Huey wasn't selfish. I don't want to give a wrong impression. I always had everything I wanted, and stopped at the counter for coffee and donuts. My sister might want to rent a room to a nice lady, this woman said to me. She's got this little crippled kid. So I said, "Where does your sister live, dear?" That was where I got my first direction, you see, Smith Street, where I was going to be living for a while. The city is a pretty city, particularly after living in the country. I have nothing actually against trees and grass, of course, but Huey always wanted to live in the country. There was a zoo somewhere in the city and a college and a few big stores and streetcars, which I believe you don't often see anymore. I knew there was an art gallery. Who could be married to Huey, that painter, and not know about an art gallery? And a symphony orchestra, and surely a little theater group, mostly wives and fairies. If I liked the city and I stayed, I might look up the little theater group. There was an art movie, and I hoped at least one good restaurant. I am a first-rate cook. More than anything else, more than art movies or zoos, I wanted to talk to people. I was starved for strangers. I began with the woman at the counter in the railroad station. She has this little crippled kid. "Where does your sister live, dear?" She was married to the same man for 27 years, and all he left her was the house and this little kid. He's crippled. Me, I don't like a man like that. They don't leave you with much, and that's a fact. After 27 years married to the same man, she shouldn't have to take in roomers. But if one of her roomers turns out to be me, it might all have been worthwhile. That's where I've been, visiting my sister. She put down her coffee cup. I come to visit her, and then I take the train back home. You have to take the train to get from my house to hers. She looked at me carefully, as though she might be wondering whether I could remember my own name. She lives on Smith Street. You'll know the house. It's big. She's got this sign, rooms. At least he left her a big house, I said. Up and down stairs all the time. Keeping up a big house these days. She's not getting any younger. And the kid. Well, we're none of us, I said. After that, I talked to a man on a corner. He was waiting for a streetcar. "Does this streetcar go to Smith Street?" I asked him. "What streetcar?" He turned and looked down the street. "The one you're waiting for. This is a car stop, isn't it?" He looked again, and we marveled together at the delights of the city, where you could stand on a corner and a streetcar would come. "Where, you say?" he asked me. "Smith Street." "You live there?" "Yes, I got this little crippled kid. Big house." "No," he said. "You get that car across the street, because across the street is going the other way. How long you say you've lived there?" 27 years, with the same man." "He any better at catching streetcars than you are?" "He's a motor man," I told him. I try to avoid his route. This clearly sounded right to him. "Women always checking up," he said, and turned away from me. Then I talked to an old lady in a bookshop who was so very tired that she leaned her elbows on piles of books as we talked. She told me that the city was hell on books because of the college, and they stole 1,000 paper books a year. "They can't seem to think of them as books," she said, furious. "Books they don't dare steal because of the covers. Also, they know I'm watching." "Do you sell a lot of books?" "It's the college," she said. "They come here to get an education." She laughed, furious. "No one speaks English anymore," she said. She took her elbows off the pile of books and went back to sit down on a dirty old chair in the back of the store. "I'm watching," she called out. "I'm still watching." But I was leaving. I went to the correct side of the street and put my suitcase down and waited, carrying my pocketbook and my first doll until a streetcar came by reading Smith Street. And I decided, well, this is certainly the streetcar they meant when they said it went to Smith Street. I swung my suitcase on and climbed up behind it. You know, they, no old ladies, not me, and little crippled kids and pregnant women and maybe sick people with broken arms are all going to have to ride on these streetcars. You'd think they didn't want passengers the way they make those steps. I suppose the salary they pay the motorman, he wouldn't help anyone anyway. He looked at me. He was sitting down driving his streetcar, and I was climbing on with my suitcase and my pocketbook and my first doll, and I figured if he wasn't going to help me, I wasn't going to help him. So I said, "Does this streetcar go to Smith Street?" He looked at me. I must say I like it better when they look at you. A lot of the time people seem to be scared of finding out that other people have real faces. As though if you looked at a stranger clearly and honestly and with both eyes, you might find yourself learning something you didn't actually want to know. "Lady," he said, "I promise you, this streetcar goes to Smith Street every trip." "That's why," he said, and he was not smiling. "That's why it says so on the front." "You're sure?" I was not smiling either, and he knew he had met someone as stubborn as he was, so he quit. "Yes, lady," he said, "I'm almost positive." "Thank you," I said. It never pays to let a minute like that slip by. Every word counts. I might never see that motorman again, but on the other hand, I might be living on Smith Street and ride home with him every night. He might get to calling me by whatever name I finally picked out, and I might take to asking him every night how his wife's asthma was today, and did his daughter break up with that guy who stole the money. And I might take to asking him every night, "Say, driver, does this streetcar go to Smith Street?" And he might say every night, not smiling, "Yes, lady, it surely does." Huey would not have thought any of that was funny. In case he ever does come back asking, I will certainly remember not to tell him. There is a kind of controlled madness to streetcars. They swing along as though they haven't quite come to terms with tracks yet and haven't really decided whether tracks are here to stay or streetcars are here to stay on tracks. They swing and tilt and knock people around, especially people who are trying to hold onto a suitcase and a pocketbook and a first doll. I sat there sliding around on the seat and wondering if anyone was laughing at me, and wondering if maybe I was the streetcar type after all, and outside the window the city went by. I saw the biggest store in town and thought that someday very soon I would be in there, and I might say, "Well, if you haven't got this blouse in a size 44, I'll just run across the street and try there." I would have to have a name before I could open any charge accounts anywhere. "I'd rather you didn't carry money," Huey used to say. "I want you to go into a store and pick out what you want and tell them your name and walk out. I don't care if it's $1,000. Just tell them your name and take what you want." There were hotels. I might come back for a visit someday and see all my old friends on Smith Street. I might go tea dancing at the splendid hotel, although one letter was missing from its marquee. I might drop into the lobby of the Royal Hotel to hear who was being paged and pick up a name that way. I saw a drugstore where I might get a prescription filled and buy shampoo. I saw a shop where I might buy records and a place to get my shoes repaired, and a laundry and a candy store and a grocery and a leather shop and a pet shop and a toy store. It was a proper little city, correct and complete, set up exactly for my private use, fitted out with quite the right people waiting for me to come. I slid around on the streetcar seat and thought that they had done it all very well. I must say that motorman got the last word. I was still looking out the window when he turned around and yelled, "Smith Street." In case there was any doubt about who he was yelling at, he pointed his finger at me. "How's your wife's asthma?" I asked him when I came down the aisle with my suitcase and my pocketbook and my first doll. "Better, thank you," he said. "Watch your step." It was Smith Street. All right, no one had lied to me yet. They wanted to make sure I got there as planned. There was a sign on the corner saying Smith Street. I was glad to see that there were trees. Far down at the end, I could see what looked like a little park, and on either side of Smith Street, going down to the park, there were trees. I thought I would enjoy coming home under the trees, in the rain perhaps, or in the fall when the leaves were dropping. I thought I would enjoy hearing the sound of the leaves brushing against my window. The houses were the kind no one has built for a good 27 years, big and ample and made for people who like to sit on their front porches and watch their neighbors. There were lawns and bushes and garden hoses. There were dogs. The house I wanted was on my right, about halfway down the block. It was a big house with a sign saying rooms, although I didn't see any little kids looking crippled. I stood across the street from the house for a few minutes. Here I am, I thought. Here I am. No one, anywhere, anytime, had given me any word of any other place to go. This was the only objective I had. If I didn't go in here, they wouldn't tell me any other place to go. I wondered which room was going to be mine and whether I would look down from its window onto the street and see myself standing there looking up and waiting. By the time I looked out of the window, I would have to have a name. Right then I wished I could sit down for a minute and maybe have a little something to eat. Nothing looked sillier than a 44-year-old woman standing on a sidewalk with a suitcase and a pocketbook and a fur stole trying to think up a name for herself. Somewhere down the street, someone called a dog calling, "Here, Rover," and I thought that Rover was probably a good name, but it was not actually exactly what I was looking for. I thought I might stop someone going by and ask for their name, but no one wants to give away a name that might be terribly important to keep, and even if they did tell it to me, I might not be able to spell it or even pronounce it right, and if you've got a name at all, you've got to be able to say it out loud. I thought of Laura, but Laura was my mother's name. I didn't want any more of Huey and his names, and Bertha was my grandmother, and who wants to be named Bertha, particularly after her grandmother? I thought of Muriel, but that just sounds like someone who gets raped and robbed in an alley. I once had a cat named Edward, and because he was silver, I changed his name to Stargazer, and then this spring to Robin, and when I got tired, which I did very soon, of a cat named Robin, I tried to change his name to Edward again, and he got sick and died. You have to be terribly careful with names. One too many and you lose. I thought of Jean and Helen and Margaret, but I knew people called by those names, and perhaps I would not enjoy answering to them. I thought of Gertrude and Goneril, and I thought of Diana, which was dead wrong, and Minerva, which was closer but silly. I knew I had to think of something right away, and I got a little chill at the back of my neck. What is really more frightening than being without a name? Nothing to call yourself, nothing to say when they ask who you are? Then it fell on me. I heard it. Angela. It was right. Angela was the name I had come all this way to find. The rest of it was easy. I had said it already. Angela Motorman. Mrs. Angela Motorman. So Mrs. Angela Motorman walked slowly and decently up the walk to the fine old house with the sign in the window saying rooms. She was carrying her suitcase and her pocketbook and her fur stole, and she stopped for a minute to look the house over very carefully. A lady cannot be too wary of the company she may find herself among. A lady chooses her place of residence with caution. As she set her foot on the steps, she put her shoulders back and took a deep breath. Mrs. Angela Motorman, who never walked on earth before. I must say, she had the good sense to offer me a cup of tea right away once she found out I was a friend of her sister's. And in case you were wondering about me having lunch on the train and coffee and a donut in the station and now a cup of tea and cookies, let me just remark that I have plenty of room to put it all. And what do you do, Mrs. Motorman? She asked me. I dabble in the supernatural, I told her. Her name was Mrs. Fawn. We both had names. How is my sister? She wanted to know. Doing well, I said. Of course she has her troubles like the rest of us. I had taken to the house right away. I like most houses, and this was one of the best. The staircase was good, wide, and clearly worn by 100 trips up and down every day, up and down, till your feet could fall off. It was a solid house, a devil to clean, but prepared to stand right where it was forever. Enough people had lived here to make the air very alive. I was ready for any number to come around asking, but first I had to deal with Mrs. Fawn. "I've just buried my husband," I said. "I've just buried mine," she said. "Isn't it a relief?" I said. "What?" she said. "It was a very sad occasion," I said. "You're right," she said. "It's a relief." She had a jaw, and she served a strong cup of tea, and I would not say a bad word against a woman who put out her own homemade sugar cookies for a guest. I am an excellent cook. The tea was served in the kitchen. As soon as I said I was a friend of her sister, she said quite rightly, "I was just having a cup of tea. Come on in the kitchen." When I tried to say it for the first time, I was not actually certain how it was going to sound because no one had ever said it before in the history of this earth. And I thought to myself, I'm giving birth. "I'm Mrs. Angela Motorman," I said. "I'm Mrs. Fawn," she said right back. "I was just having a cup of tea." I thought that Mrs. Fawn and I were going to be all right together. I didn't know yet whether she had a silly laugh or went on tapping her fingers on the table, but I liked her kitchen, which had no gadgets, and I liked her stove, which was still warm from making sugar cookies, and I liked her jaw. "I'm not saying I want a room, and I'm not saying I don't," I told her. "But if I did, what would you have to show me?" "I'm not saying I have a room, and I'm not saying I don't," she said right back. "But if you wanted to look, I could let you see a very pretty little place." Oh, I was going to be all right with Mrs. Fawn. I liked her jaw, and I liked her stove, and I liked her house, and if she wanted to have a little crippled kid, I was certainly not going to stand in her way. "It's hard for a woman alone," I said. "What do you do, Mrs. Motorman?" "I dabble in the supernatural." "My niece had this meningitis," she said as though I had asked some kind of a question. "Let me fill your cup. She had this meningitis and it got to her heart. They knew it was going to, of course, but they never told her. She had it for years before she found out it got to her heart." "My cousin had mercury poisoning," I said. "That goes directly to the heart, of course. He only lasted for about 3 days." "I had a cousin something like that," she said. "You mentioned what a short time they last, only in her case it all went to the brain. Reddest face I ever saw, and she died not knowing one of us." "My aunt was the same," I said, "only she died of pneumonia. That's a very quick one. It catches you without any warning. You swell up and there you go." "Bloated," she said, "like my nephew, only his was alcohol." "And then there was this friend of mine," I said. "She had cirrhosis of the scalp. They don't have a cure yet for any of those things, you know, and they run right through you. I hate to think of the way my friend went right on suffering until the very end." "Very often the end is the most to be desired," she said. "There was a friend of mine, we all couldn't wait for her to go, but she had cancer, incurable." "I had a friend who had cancer," I said, "but they cut off her right leg." "That's never enough," she said. "Mark me, she'll be back for her other leg. I knew a woman once who lost both arms that way." "My uncle fell under a truck," I said. I wondered if I should tell her about my great aunt. "I'm sorry about your uncle," she said. "Do you want a room or don't you?" "I do." "And what do you do, Mrs. Motorman?" "I dabble in the supernatural. Traffic with spirits, seances, messages, psychiatric advice, that kind of thing." "I never had one of those before," Mrs. Fawn said. "I'm not saying I haven't had all kinds. You rent out rooms. It's sometimes a surprise what you get." "I never lived in a room before." "You won't find it terribly difficult, she said, not smiling. "All you have to do is pay for it regularly. I'd be willing to add some meals, but that would be extra." "Perhaps I could give a hand with the cooking. I'm a fine cook." "I'm not sure, but what that would be extra too," she said. "You may not cook in your room." "I promise," I said. "You may not smoke in your bed." "I promise." "You may not make noise late at night." "I promise." "These are all safety precautions," she explained to me. "Thou shalt not, you may not keep dirty pets." "I promise." "You may not spread any contagious diseases, although the room I plan to show you has a private bath. Linen provided, we do the heavy cleaning, and anything you raise by way of spirits you have to put back yourself." Oh, I liked Mrs. Fawn. She turned her head suddenly, and then she stood up and went over to the back door of the kitchen, the door leading outside, and opened it. "Little early today," she said. "Must have run all the way," which was clearly some kind of a private joke because there was laughter. I helped myself to another cookie, and then Mrs. Fawn came back pushing the wheelchair. There was a ramp built outside the door so she could push it right inside without difficulty. "This is my son, Tom," Mrs. Fawn said. "Tom, this is Mrs. Motorman." Once again, it sounded all right. I was going to learn to answer to it. "Hi," the boy in the wheelchair said. He seemed to be about 12 years old, although it's hard to tell with the boy sitting down. "Any cookies left?" "I got my share," I said. "Someday, if you want me to, I'll make you my special chocolate cake. It's got 5 layers. "Okay," he said, and then he laughed. "Motorman's a funny name," he said. "I just made it up," I told him. "You just home from school?" "I like school," he said, "but they're always surprised I'm not smarter because I don't play baseball and stuff. They always think I'm going to be smarter than anyone else, and I'm not." "Maybe if you practice," I said. One kid pushes me down the street every morning, and another kid pushes me back home in the afternoon. They do all the pushing, and I ride both ways, and it's great, but I'm not as smart as they think I ought to be." "You're smart enough for your own good," Mrs. Fawn said. She brought him a glass of milk and pushed the plate of cookies a little closer to him. "I'll go and check your room," she said to me. "I'm pretty smart," he said to me anxiously. "I'm not stupid, of course. I'm pretty smart, but I never got pushed back and forth to school." "Well, I'm planning to be a scholar, and I better get started pretty soon. You know any Spanish?" "No." "I want to learn Spanish and French and Italian and Russian and then Latin and Greek and be a scholar. So far, I only know a little Spanish, but I'm lazy." "One of these days, I might push you to the movies," I said. "I would like that," he said. "Perhaps a movie in Spanish or French to improve my accent." We each had another cookie. Then he said, "What do you study, Mrs. Motorman?" "I was married to a painter." "Was he any good?" "He was lousy." "Is he dead?" "Yes." "How long do you think I ought to go on studying Spanish before I start French? They're both good languages." "If you're so lazy, why not give up the whole thing?" "Well," he said, thinking, "I suppose it's because they all keep waiting for me to be so smart. I wouldn't play baseball if I could. You can hurt yourself playing those games, but I don't mind being a scholar." "Look," I said, "I'm not used to talking to kids." "Oh, that's all right," he said. "I don't know why you can't just sit around and read books." Mrs. Fawn came back and said, "Drink your milk there, and your room is ready." She touched the boy on the head, and he said, "Hey, Mrs. Motorman and I are going to the movies someday." And Mrs. Fawn looked at me for a minute and then said, "I think you're going to like the room." I brought a couple of cookies upstairs with me just in case. My room was perfectly square, which was good. My name was Mrs. Angela Motorman, and this was where I was going to live, in a square room in Mrs. Fawn's house on Smith Street. I did not know as yet what I was going to add to this room. It already held a bed and a dresser and 2 chairs and a pretty little desk, something like the pretty little desk I had last seen disappearing into the back of a station wagon when I had my auction. There was nothing in these desk drawers. I did not know as yet what I was going to put in them. There was a little bookcase which would hold, I thought, perhaps 11 books. I would have to choose my 11 books very carefully. When I found them, I could write Angela Motorman on the fly leaves. I put my underwear and stockings into the dresser drawers and hung my 2 dresses and my fur stole in the closet. Someday I would go to the department stores and buy new clothes. I put my brush and comb on the dresser and put my sleeping pills on the bedside table and put my reading glasses beside them. I had no pets, no address books, no small effects to set around on tables or pin on walls. I had no list of friends to keep in touch with and no souvenirs. All I had was myself. I like people, but I have never needed companions. Huey was my only mistake. I set an armchair next to the window of my room, and I was pleased to see that I did indeed look out over the trees and onto the spot on the street where I had stood not long ago wondering over a name. "It's all right, Angela," I said very softly out the window. "It's all right. You made it. You came in, and it's all right. You got here after all." And outside, the dim, nameless creature named herself Mrs. Angela Motorman and came steadily to the door. I have a real feeling for shapes. I like things square. and my room was finally square. Even though I couldn't cook there, I thought I could be happy. I wanted the barest rock bottom of a room I could have. I wanted nothing but a place to sleep and a place to sit and a place to put my things. Any decorating done to my environment is me. One reason is the first time it happened was in a square room, my own room when I was about 12. Before then, most of it was just whisperings and little half thoughts, the way a child almost notices something, almost remembers. But this time it was real and I was not daydreaming. I know when I'm dreaming. I sat up in bed in the middle of the night and heard my own voice saying, "What? What?" And then I heard another voice, not coming out of my own head. I know what comes out of my own head, saying, "Find Rosalind Bleecker. Tell her Sid says hello." 3 times I heard that crazy voice say, "Tell her Sid says hello." I knew Rosalind Bleecker. In all the years since, I've never forgotten her name, and because she was 4 or 5 years older and in high school, I had a little trouble finding her the next day. But I caught her when she was walking home. I remember I had trouble getting her attention. I was just a little kid, and she was popular and pretty and always laughing. She was wearing a white blouse and a blue skirt and a charm bracelet. Her hair was curly. She was carrying her biology textbook and a blue-covered notebook. Her shoes were white. Her eyes were blue. She wore a little lipstick. I pulled at her sleeve and said, "Rosalind, hey, Rosalind." Not very loud because she was a high school girl. She turned around and looked down at me and frowned. Because I was a kid and she was a high school girl and I was pulling at her sleeve. "Listen, Rosalind," I said, "listen, I'm supposed to tell you Sid says to say hello." "What?" she said. "Sid says to say hello," I said, and then ran because I had nothing more to say and I felt silly. I heard later she went home and hanged herself. I don't know. Anyway, that was the first time. After that, there were lots more, some more real than others. There was the time I said to my mother, "Grandma just picked up the phone to call you," and she said, "That's nice," just as the phone rang. She looked at me funny. They always did after a while. "I dabble in the supernatural," I told Mrs. Fawn. She thought I was making some kind of a joke. "I quit when I married Huey. You'd have to." I remember another time when I sat by the window and my mother, who ought to have known better by then, said to me, "Why are you always brooding, staring out the window, never doing anything?" "I'm watching the peacocks walking on the lawn," I said. "But you ought to be out playing with the other children. Why do you suppose we moved here to a nice neighborhood so you could always sit looking out the window instead of playing with the other kids? Haven't you got any friends? Doesn't anyone like you?" "I'm watching the peacocks," I tried to tell her. "They're walking on the lawn and I'm watching them." "You ought to be out with your friends. What are peacocks doing on our lawn, ruining the grass?" And she came over to look out the window. As I say, she ought to have known better. Sometimes I knew and sometimes I didn't. There would be times when I lay on my stomach on the floor watching creatures playing under the dining room table, and I knew then, of course, that my mother wasn't going to see them and was maybe going to put her foot through one when she came by to say, why did they move to a nice neighborhood and I wouldn't go out and make friends. Sometimes my good square room would be so full I just lay in bed and laughed. Sometimes weeks would go by and I would be reading some specially interesting book or painting or following people every day after school, and nothing would come at all. Sometimes they followed me. Once an old man followed me, but he turned out to be real. I could see what the cat saw. When I was about 16, I began to get self-conscious about all of it. It wasn't that I minded them coming around asking and following me everywhere I went. Most 16-year-old girls like to be followed, but by then I knew no one else was going to see them, and sometimes I felt like a fool. You don't go around staring at empty air all the time. Not when you're 16 years old, you don't. Not with people beginning to notice. "Do you need glasses?" my mother used to ask me. Or, "Can't you, for heaven's sake, stop gawking at nothing and shut your mouth and comb your hair and get out with the other kids?" Then sometimes for weeks at a time, I would think that they had gone away, maybe for good. And I'd start taking care of my hair and putting polish on my nails and hanging around the soda shop or going to a football game. And then first thing I knew, I'd be talking to someone and a face would come between us and a mouth would open saying some crazy thing. And I'd be watching and listening, and whomever I had been talking to would wait for a few minutes and then get edgy and walk away while I was still listening to some other voice. After a while, I just stopped talking to anybody. That's not a good way for a girl to grow up. It's easy to say that if I knew then what I know now, I could have handled it better. How can anyone handle things if her head is full of voices and her world is full of things no one else can see? I'm not complaining. I sat in my pleasant square room at Mrs. Fawn's house and thought about it all. Ever since I can remember, I thought as quietly as I could. I have been seeing and hearing things no one else could see and hear. By now I can control the nuisance to some extent. It disappeared entirely when I married Huey. I have reason to believe now that it is coming back. I sat in Mrs. Fawn's house and thought, what good did it do to sell the house and find a new name? They don't care what your name is when they come around asking. At first, I tried to point them out to people. I was even foolish enough at first to think other people just hadn't noticed. Look at that, I would say. Look, right over there, it's a funny man. It didn't take long for my mother to put a stop to that. There isn't any funny man anywhere, she would say and jerk on my arm. What kind of a sewer do you have for a mind? Once, I tried to tell a neighbor about it. It was quite accidental because I rarely told anyone anything. He was sitting on his front porch one evening in summer, and I had been lying on the grass on our lawn, watching small lights go and come among the grass blades and listening to a kind of singing. Sometimes, especially in summer, it was a kind of pleasant world I lived in, and he heard me laughing. He asked me to come and sit on his front porch, and he gave me a glass of lemonade. And when he asked me what I had been doing, I went ahead and told him. I told him about seeing and hearing, and he listened, which is more than anyone else ever did. You're clairvoyant, he told me, and I always remembered that. He probably knew less than nothing about it, but he listened and said I was clairvoyant. Later, he told my mother I ought to be taken to some special clinic and examined. And for about 3 days, she decided I was pregnant. I never talked to him again. I wanted to once in a while, but he never spoke to me after that. I knew a lot about people, a lot that they never knew I knew. But I never seemed to have much sense, probably because one thing I never really knew was whether what I was doing was real or not. The house, I later found out, was almost all square. It had 3 floors and a basement, and neat trim porches on 3 sides. Whoever built that house had either very little imagination or a mind much like mine, because everything was neatly cornered and as near as possible the same size. That is, one door matched the next almost perfectly, and where there were doors, they were as often as possible right in the middle of the wall, with an equal space on either side of them. The windows were perfectly correct. When I asked Mrs. Fawn later, she told me that there were 5 people renting rooms in the house. I thought it was wrong that they should be an odd number, but since I was the 5th, I could hardly protest. And in any case, she had only 6 rooms to rent. On the top floor were a Mr. Brand, who was a bookkeeper, and a Mr. Cabot, who was, Mrs. Fawn believed, in merchandising. On the second floor were old Mrs. Flanner, who kept a bookshop, Mr. Campbell, who was in transit, and me. Mrs. Fawn kept the ground floor for herself. I always wanted it that way, she told me. I always used to dream of the time when I could live on the ground floor. I had it planned for years. I always thought the dining room would work out better as a bedroom, and I hated the idea of going upstairs every night and leaving it behind. It's more comfortable, it's more convenient, and it's perfectly safe. In case of fire, I can get out. I may say that in all the time I was in that house, I never met Mr. Campbell, who was in transit. We were a gay crew, I soon discovered. Here I was with one suitcase and a fur stole and a pocketbook with plenty of money, but old Mrs. Flanner had had her same room for 9 years, and she had a television set, all her own furniture, including a Chinese liqueur table, purple drapes on the windows, and a silver tea service. Brand and Cabot on the top floor took cocktails in one another's room every day at 6. Mrs. Fawn was apt to invite anyone at random to Sunday dinner. She was almost as good a cook as I am. Brand played the cello, and Mrs. Flanner used to sing at one time before her voice cracked. Mrs. Flanner also played the dirtiest game of bridge that Mrs. Fawn had ever seen. Brand had a small mustache. Cabot collected Coalport china. Mrs. Fawn disliked garlic and consequently never made a decent salad dressing until the day she died. Brand fell over the bottom step of the staircase every night regularly, coming home at 5:30. He was neither drunk nor clumsy. He never fell over anything else that anyone ever knew of. He never dropped anything or spilled anything. But every night at 5:30, Mr. Brand tripped over the bottom step of the staircase. You could set your clock by Brand falling over the bottom step of the staircase. Mrs. Fawn used to say, if it was important to you to set your clock at 5:30, Brandon Cabot and Flanner and I usually took most of our meals at a little restaurant around the corner, but every Friday night Brand went to his mother's, and every Saturday night Cabot took out a girl. He had been taking her out for 4 years now. Mrs. Fawn said, but thought marriage was too confining. I liked Mrs. Fawn. I had almost nothing to do, so I got to help him with the housework, and we'd knock off and sit around the kitchen drinking coffee and eating cookies. Mrs. Fawn baked every second morning before anyone was up, and one thing I did like about living in that house was waking up to the smell of cookies baking. My room, as I say, was absolutely perfectly square. I measured it. I admire a house with a good square room, and when I unpacked, I knew I was going to stay. First, I unpacked my picture, my painting. It had been painted with Huey's paints, but I painted it myself. Keep it around if you like, Huey said. You're proud of it, all right. Don't think I hate all painting styles but my own. So my own painting went on the wall, although Mrs. Fawn said that it would cost to repair the hole. Cabot liked my painting and Brand. Mrs. Flanner poked it with her finger and said it took her back. Mrs. Fawn said it would cost to repair the hole. What do you do, Mrs. Motorman? Brand asked me. A little shoplifting sometimes, I told him. Some meddling. What brought you to our city? Curiosity, I told him. Brand and Cabot asked me up for cocktails, and Mrs. Fawn asked me for Sunday dinner, and Mrs. Flanner asked me if I played bridge, and I said no. I walked to the end of Smith Street and around in the little park under the trees. One day I went back to the streetcar and got on and went into the center of the city, where I went into the first large store and looked at blouses. If you don't have this blouse in a size 44, I told the salesgirl, I'll just run across the street and look. I didn't go across the street. Actually, I spoke to a lady in a drugstore where I stopped to have a sandwich and a milkshake. They're all chemicals now, she said to me. You can't even buy pure vanilla. All chemicals. In a drugstore, you'd expect chemicals. Everywhere. You think you're drinking chocolate in that milkshake? Nothing but chemicals. I didn't actually come into the city for a milkshake, though. I came to buy a blouse. Well, they're chemicals. Clothes, food, drink, plants growing in nothing but water, laboratories overcrowded. It's a bad world. Bourbon. It's all this mad race into space, she said, and went away. When I got onto the streetcar to go back, it said Smith Street in big letters on the front. Does this streetcar go to Smith Street? I asked the motorman, and he looked at me for a minute, and then he said very quietly, Yes, ma'am, it does. Thank you, I said. How's your wife's asthma? I am not married, he said. Thank God. When I decided it was time for me to give a seance, I spoke to Mrs. Fawn first, of course, since it was her house and I had no idea how she might feel about people coming around asking in her own house. I thought I might hold a kind of small seance, I said to her. What would that include? She asked me. Well, I sit in the middle and everyone sits around, and we might have sherry, and then I give messages. Who provides the sherry? Everyone has some kind of a question they'd like to get answered. Some kind of a question can only be answered from beyond. I was sure she was going to say beyond what, so I said quickly, "You don't have to believe if you don't want to." "Thank you," she said. "I'll let you have the cooking sherry." "May I use the little parlor?" "That means I'd have to come," Mrs. Fawn said, "unless I choose to sit in the kitchen all the time." "I'd be honored if you'd come." Who else would be here? I had made a little sign reading "Messages obtained, questions answered, fortunes," and tacked it up in the bookshop I found my first day. Several people had been interested. The bookshop lady had promised to let them know, so I told Mrs. Fawn, "I think there will be several people, and of course anyone from the house." "Not Tom. I don't allow him seances." "Has the question ever come up before?" "Not that I ever thought it would, but he can read all right in his room. He doesn't listen in." "One reason I want to use the little parlor is that chair." Mrs. Fawn actually laughed. "It used to be my husband's favorite chair," she said, "night after night." "Did he ever get any manifestation sitting there?" "Not that he thought it worthwhile mentioning, but it's a good chair. I don't much care for it myself, but I could sell it for money." It was a good chair. It had a back higher than my head, and the arms were solid, and altogether it looked something like a throne of which the seat had been amply seasoned by Mr. Fawn's bottom. Whenever the door of the little parlor was open, I sneaked in and sat down for a minute. I liked that chair. "Are you sure," Mrs. Fawn asked me, "that you are not tampering with things better left alone? Are you sure that you know what you're doing? Are you sure, Mrs. Motorman, that you are not stirring up some kind of trouble that will hang around my house?" "It's exactly like taking a long-distance call," I told her. "Once you hang up, it's over." I never knew a long-distance call didn't mean trouble for someone. The little parlor had drapes, which Mrs. Fawn never closed, which is why the dust rose when I closed them, which is why I sneezed and Mrs. Fawn scowled. She kept a clean house generally. I moved the fine chair into the center of the room, and we put a few dining room chairs around, not too many because I wasn't sure how many would come and I didn't want to look anxious, but enough so no one would stand. No one stood around in Mrs. Fawn's house. Perhaps because Tom was always sitting down, she thought people standing were uncomfortable. Although I had plenty of money, I put a large orange bowl, in which Mrs. Fawn usually kept apples, on a low table moved just enough out from the wall to be noticeable. "People expect this," I told Mrs. Fawn. "I'll bring the sherry and the glasses," she said, "and you can pay me out of the pot. It's really a hobby of mine mostly, but if it does people good, why keep it to myself? If more people kept more things to themselves, this world would be a better place." Mrs. Fawn gave the curtain a little shake. "How you can find dust beats me," she said. I don't know what the bookstore lady could have said around the bookstore, or even what Mrs. Fawn might have said around the neighborhood, because when I came to give my seance, there were 8 people, which made us 9 altogether, which is good. I had decided to wear my long, dark blue dress. It doesn't fit as well as it used to, but who says a psychic has to be smart? It has these long sleeves, and I wore my pearls. I will say that for Huey. He didn't stint me. All right, I thought, I'll try it once anyway. They all sat there watching me as though they dared me to put something over on them. The watchful, the eager, the perceptive. I realized I was stalling. There were a number of things I wanted to do right now, a lot more than lean back and close my eyes in the face of those watching people. I knew they would keep on staring at me after I was gone, and I hated that. I could have said right then that it was a joke, and they would have believed me. "I don't know anything about all this," came to my mind. "Please, all of you, go away and don't try to make me do something I hate." But of course I didn't. I looked each of them right in the eye, thinking, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. I hope you are brutally disappointed." And I nodded at Mrs. Fawn, who at least was almost snarling out loud, And I leaned back and felt the worn velvet of the chair against the back of my neck and wondered who was clamoring around just inside, waiting to come around asking. And I closed my eyes. I could hear them breathing, easy, slow, contemptuous. That would be Mrs. Fawn, waiting to be shown. Then the others, quick and eager, a little woman watching, the men aware, alert, dishonest. I was in a great hall, lofty, pillared, reaching into the distance. There were flowers in great pots and the old crystal palace, maybe, tall glittering walls. There were many people. I waited quietly, not knowing who was going to come around asking, and waited, and then found one man singled out, almost drifting to where I waited, almost moving without movement, surely without sound. A tall man, I said, and heard my own voice remotely. A tall man wanting something. He has gray hair. He is not very old, but he has gray hair. My father, someone said. My brother, someone else said. Excuse me, my father. He says, and I raised my voice, hearing it speak out there to them while I listened inside. He says to take up the book he left behind, the book that he held in his hands near the end, the book he was holding in his hands. He says to take up the book and turn to page. It has an 8 and a 5. Dad? I beg your pardon, my brother. I know the book very well. An 8 and a 5. Find the page and there will be a message. A letter? A message? He says he left a message. Ask him if he's happy. Tell him it's his sister asking. Excuse me? He does not know the word happy. He is here and that is all. He is going now. I'm sure it was my father. If I had been given a chance to speak, someone is here, I said. I heard my voice saying it. Someone is asking for Alice, Anna, Angela. I knew even then there was something wrong with Angela, but I had forgotten what. Alice? My wife? Her name is Agnes. She's ill, is she not? Someone is asking if she is better, if her illness has abated. Someone is asking that you tell her the old medicine is better. Someone wants her to know that she is being taken care of. Someone is over her now, comforting her. But the old medicine didn't. Tell her someone is caring for her. She will be better. Will you ask my father to come back again? I must speak to him, really. There are many here, some of them wanting to speak, some of them moving away. One who wants to speak is asking for a daughter, but it is not a father who wants a daughter. Someone is asking for a daughter. Is there a daughter here? My mother? My mother wants to speak to me? What for? Are you well? Are you contented? Someone is asking if you are well. It's not my mother then, because she, gone now. Some are pressing close to me, some are far away. Here's someone with a message. Do not forget old Ginger. What? Do not forget old Ginger. My Lord, I thought from somewhere far away. Old Ginger was my cat. Messages for myself. Better quit soon. Do not forget old Ginger, I said, as though I ever could. Here is someone asking, a message for a wife. I don't want it, Mrs. Fawn said. I could hear her voice, thin and annoyed. Tell him to go away again. I don't want to hear anything he has to say. Someone is here, someone who wants to ask about a little child. Was the little child lost? Did it ever come home again? Where's the little child? Get my father back. We don't know any little... Now there is a message here, a message for TL. Me? The first initial's really J, but they always called me Teddy. I guess it's for me. Good fortune in store for you, TL. Great good fortune is being warned against. Do not be deceived. So that was my first seance. It couldn't have been a very good one since no one said anything and there was only 35 cents in the pot. I had to pay 50 cents more out of my own pocket for the sherry. All they talk about is death and dying, I said to Mrs. Fawn after she had seen them out, and they are cheap. What do you expect? She opened the drapes, blowing dust off her nose. They could take a little bit more interest. If they were interested in real life, they wouldn't have come to listen to you. You'll find out. I thought she was being unnecessarily dreary, but that, as it turned out, was going to be Mrs. Fawn's way. They're all crazy, she said. All they want is to be told what to do. They wait for some crackpot to give them the word. If by crackpot you mean, I mean what I mean, Mrs. Fawn said. If the shoe fits, Mrs. Motorman. Well, I don't want you to think that Mrs. Fawn and I came right out and quarreled all the time. We kind of sharpened our nails on each other, that was all. And most of the time we finished off our arguments laughing together over a cup of tea, although I must say I was surprised when I began getting a weekly bill from Mrs. Fawn in addition to the rent for the room, for tea, cookies, etc. I thought you invited me, I said to her the first week. It won't hurt you, she said. I get what I can. I started following people after a day or so in the city. One thing is certain. You can't find your way around a strange city without someone to show you where to go. And when all you know is a Mrs. Fawn who won't step out of her front parlor for a bomb explosion on the street outside, you pretty well have to get the way from strangers. The first person I followed was an old fellow I picked up outside a restaurant. He had been eating caviar, and I like to follow someone who is good and full of caviar, although I don't care for it myself. It seemed that he might lead me to a far more interesting place than I might find by myself, and in a sense he did. Why are you following me? He asked, turning suddenly on me at a street corner. I was not as good at following people then as I became later. Because you were eating caviar, I said. Sometimes the truth doesn't hurt. I like caviar. I don't. Where did you plan to follow me? He was still bewildered, but I thought amused. I'm not very terrifying to look at, I believe. In any case, he was clearly a man without a guilty conscience, or at least no kind of conscience that being followed by me might bother. Perhaps being followed by a lovely young 19-year-old boy might have bothered him some. Come and have tea with me, he said. I swear he took out a card case and handed me a card. I don't think I have ever known anyone to do that before. I'd like to, I told him. It will save me money with Mrs. Fawn. There was the day I tried my hand at shoplifting. It was particularly important because of the weather. It was one of those winter days which suddenly dreams of spring, when the sky is blue and soft and clear, and the wind has dropped its voice and whispers instead of screaming, and the sun is out and the trees look surprised, and over everything there is the faintest, palest tint of green. Weather entertains me. I'm trying my hand at shoplifting, I told the salesgirl, and we both laughed. I went to the biggest department store. I had not been there before, but one big department store is much like another. This one was one I might have been in 100 times before. I knew where things were and recognized the heavily scented air, so rich after the clean air outside. Sometimes I like big stores with softness underfoot and pressing against the sides of your head. I like long counters with soft highlights and seductively tumbled scarves and vacant mannequins and the dirty gloves of shoppers. I like everything about big department stores except shopping in them. I do not like salesgirls and their manners and having to buy my dresses in a special behemoth's department, and I do not like the stupid mockery of people who enjoy keeping you waiting. I do not like credit offices, but I enjoy quarreling over a bill. Huey used to be all lost, really frightened when I got into a fight with a department store because I never really felt I was fighting with people, and so it was not necessary to observe any of the small, delicate graces you would use automatically when you are fighting with people. Even with the electric company, I always knew I was fighting with people, but never with department stores, and of course not with the telephone company. We paid our bills. I don't mean to sound as if I fought with any of them because I wanted to save money, but I could always enjoy a good fight over something. I loved being in a department store, and I am only surprised that I had not thought of shoplifting long before. Shoplifting, I explained to the salesgirl and touched the little box gently with one finger, and we both laughed. I had really no good idea how you went about stealing something from a department store, but I thought I could make it up as I went along. That is, you will observe my way with almost everything. I have always been quite successful at making things up as I went along, and very often surprised at where I led myself. I never thought along the way that I might end up in jail or hurt or even embarrassed, because that is simply not the kind of thing that happens to the kind of person I am. I am not above the law, but somehow I make the law, which so many other people do not. This is not arrogance. I first became aware of this when I was a child and always got everything I wanted. Before God, I thought I wanted Huey, but this is not shoplifting. For reasons which amused me considerably, and which I do not care to discuss here, I had decided that what I most wanted to steal was an ornamental candle. I knew that there would probably be a department which sold candles and candlesticks and elaborate boxes of matches, and I thought to steal a candle and take it back to Mrs. Fawn to put in the center of her appalling mantelpiece. Moreover, a candle is not too valuable, although perhaps not always easy to hide. Poor Huey, and he was such a lousy painter. In any case, I stepped onto the escalator. Such a sense of power, such a sense of being carried, of permitting this small service underfoot, and looking down at the store, let myself be taken to the second floor where I paused briefly at lingerie. I do like lace, and then onto the third floor and the fourth where I found a gift shop and just beyond the candles I was looking for. Perhaps a black candle for Mrs. Fawn's next black mass, perhaps a candle that told time, although I do think that's too much of a good thing. The nicest part of a candle is its inaccuracy, or perhaps a candle topped with flowers, or a candle looking like a cabbage, or a house, or a poodle. I like things made to look like something else, although I draw the line at food. I once had a recipe for imitation potato pancakes made out of ground cauliflower, and they were just as vile as they sound. But an ordinary, everyday, plain camouflage is quite all right with me. I saw a candle made of 1,000 different colors, and it was very lovely. I quite wanted it. But wanting it and stealing it were two different things. If I started stealing just because I wanted a colored candle, the whole point would be lost, and I had already decided that I could not buy it. So reluctantly, I passed by the lovely candle and found quite a hideous one. It looked rather like Mrs. Fawn, I thought, and I put it in my pocket. Then I turned and saw the salesgirl looking at me with an air of complete joy. She had seen me, of course, and she took a step forward and said, "Can I help you?" and waited to see what I would do. Naturally, I took the candle out of my pocket and said, "No, just trying my hand at shoplifting," and we both laughed. I set the candle back on the counter and turned away. My candle stealing days over forever. She could have cried, that salesgirl. Perhaps she had been waiting all her working life to catch a shoplifter in action. Perhaps her big moment tonight at dinner was now hopelessly ruined. After all, I caught a shoplifter today is a much more sensational beginning to a story than just I had the craziest old lady in my department today. She must have waited on a good many crazy old ladies, and understand I am not saying I'm old. She just looked like she'd tell it that way. So I had to shoplift something else. I won't go into the number of things I took and had to put back. I don't seem really cut out for the most efficient stealing, but I did manage to pick up a box of birth announcements. I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, which I thought might suit Mrs. Fawn. No one seemed to care about those. One of the things I had to put back was a bottle of perfume called Svelte, which was fair anyway, since I really wanted that. Well, I am not boasting. Some of the things that come to me work out well, and some do not. The seance was pretty good, but I will be the very first to admit that I am not light-fingered. And that's all. I would love to have read this book. I wish that she had been able to finish it. That little part was so great, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.